demand supply curve space here. That would be represented by the supply curve now. The supply curve will represent the minimum price they were willing to accept, and that's going to be the difference between the price they actually received, which would be the equilibrium price. So again, we would have this entire region here. This would all be the producer surplus. Up here, if you remember, was the consumer surplus. You can see that those two areas are maximized under the free market system, the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. Now, how would we calculate the producer surplus? You would calculate it in the same way as you calculated the consumer surplus, with our equation of 1/2 base times height. In calculating that out, we would then have the equilibrium quantity, we would have the equilibrium price. Now, you would have to substitute in 0 for this quantity for the supply curve. Now, it is theoretically possible that you could have a y-intercept for the supply curve that exists below the origin of the graph. In other words, it could be a negative number. I'll try to avoid that in problems so that you actually have a positive y-intercept for the supply curve. So again, for instance, if our supply curve now was 100 plus 3p, right? It would be plus because it's a positive function here. Then, right, actually I should make this showing here. Let me just fix this here. Let's make this a negative 100, which is fine. It's just saying that our function here is starting, it doesn't have to start at a positive number here. I wanted to do that so that I could get for you a positive y-intercept here. Right, then my y-intercept would be approximately 33 1/3. Obviously, this is not going to work with the other example I just gave you here. I'm just making these numbers up here. Okay, so when we look at our first important concept for this chapter, then, the notion of efficiency, the one thing that we're then going to see here is that for efficiency purposes, efficiency is understood in this free market system as having maximized consumer surplus and producer surplus. What we really care about, right, is that this entire triangle is maximized. Not really who gets what. We don't really care whether consumers feel better off or producers feel better off. What we really care most about as economists is the size of this entire triangle. And that when that is maximized, we know that we have an efficient marketplace. Now the question would be, what do we know inefficiencies as? An inefficiency basically is going to come about, according to an economist, whenever there's an intervention by the government that pushes us away from the equilibrium. So intervention by the government would be something like taxation or making the price be something other than the equilibrium price. What that's going to create is, in this market, is something called the deadweight loss. And what the deadweight loss says for us is that it can be understood as occurring when the producer surplus or the consumer surplus are reduced, but it's not reallocated to another party. So, one of the things that we're going to look at here in the next to this is a 3-part chapter again, or 3-part lecture, in the discussion of price controls and taxation. We're going to look at how those two types of activities give us an inefficient market or a deadweight loss. And so we're going to more fully explain that in the second and third parts of this lecture. So I'm going to pause this right here, and in the next video I'll talk about making the price be something other than the equilibrium price.